Welcome to The Real Story. I'm your host, Riley Lewis. Thank you for joining us. Today's top story is about something powerful, and I mean quite literally. And that is, in fact, power. Everybody in this world possesses some form of power, and power can manifest in many different ways. It can take the form of intelligence. It can take the form of influence or money. It can even take the form of leadership. However, regardless of the form that it takes, what's most important is how someone chooses to use their power. Ultimately, power can be a force for good or a force for harm. And when used responsibly and wisely, it can uplift people and create positive and meaningful change. But on the other hand, when used irresponsibly and unwisely, power can break bonds, destroy trust, destroy lives, and even hurt people. And that brings us to a well-known expression that directly applies to our top story today. Great power comes with great responsibility. It's a very simple expression, but it conveys a profound and universal truth. And it applies to any kind of influence or power that one can possibly hold. Whether someone is a head coach for a sports team, the head of their household, or the head of an entire nation state, the point remains the same. The possession of power warrants careful consideration about one's actions. It necessitates a commitment to acting responsibly and thoughtfully. And most importantly, this phrase implies a duty to use one's power for the benefit of others and for the public good. After all, the failure to use one's power responsibly and wisely can lead to grave consequences for those who are affected by it. And this fact isn't lost on President Trump. As the most powerful person in the world's most powerful country, President Trump has a duty to make his decisions with remarkable consideration. And he's demonstrated an ability to do that, even in the face of immense pressure and extraordinary challenges. From, say, securing America's borders and launching the largest deportation operation in all of American history, to signing an executive order to stop the illicit spread of fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances all over America's streets. He is actively setting an example for how all leaders can use their power for the benefit of their own people. And that also brings us to the latest updates about his tariff plans. So on Thursday, President Trump signed a new executive order that adjusted the reciprocal tariffs on dozens of countries all over the globe. And they reportedly range from 10% all the way up to 50%. He signed that order just hours before the deadline to make trade deals, which is actually today, and they will take effect next week. Now, these new rates include a 35% duty on many imported goods from Canada, a 50% duty on imported goods from Brazil, a 25% duty on goods from India, and even a 20% duty on imports from Taiwan, which is one of America's closest and most strategic allies on the world stage. But all said and done, the Trump administration's new tariff plan impacts 69 of America's trading partners. Moreover, any country that isn't specifically listed in these new plans is expected to see a baseline rate of 10% moving forward. Over 24 countries, including Brazil, Laos, and even Myanmar, will face even steeper rates of up to 50% due to their massive trade imbalances with the U.S. and their failure to make a new deal with the Trump White House before today's deadline. And so this plan marks a major break from decades and decades of globalist U.S. trade policy. And while certain political figures around the planet are criticizing this plan, expressing their frustrations about it, there's really only one thing that ultimately matters: whether or not this move is good for the American people. See, President Trump isn't beholden to corporations. He's also not beholden to politicians. And he's not beholden to the citizens of, say, Brazil, Canada, Mexico, or even Laos. And as the highest-ranking official in the United States of America, he's only beholden to the American people. And that's why he's using his influence and his power as commander-in-chief to protect American consumers, American workers, and of course, American industry. It's a very simple calculus, and it's a bold form of resistance to the globalist trade policies of previous administrations, which have all but crushed the middle class in this country. So this right here is exactly what it looks like to use one's power responsibly. This is what it means to use one's power wisely. And this is what the vast majority of Americans voted for in November. So, as foreign countries and markets all over the globe scramble to adjust to this new system, it's important to consider the end goal of it: to do right by the American people. Now, here with his thoughts, analysis, and reaction is Eric Eggers, Vice President of the Government Accountability Institute. Eric, thank you for being here, sir.
Riley, that was great. Deeply philosophical opening monologue. I was wondering where we were going. Are we doing like a Lord Acton, absolute power corrupts absolutely thing? Instead, we're talking about global trade policy because, of course, great job.
I appreciate it. And on that note, I think it's important to look at the big picture here just for a moment, Eric, because when President Trump came into office, we had suffered through 4 long and painful years of horrific and historic inflation. People coming out of retirement to work again, people unable to start businesses, have families, go on vacation, millions and millions of Americans living paycheck to paycheck with no savings, no sense of financial security, and they're wondering if things are going to get better. So I'm not saying this approach is necessarily perfect, but the end goal is noble and just, and I want people to understand that's where the president is coming from. So on that note, what do you think about the news today with these new tariff plans?
Yeah, so a couple of things, and I actually think you framing it as the just execution of the power that has been awarded to Donald Trump is extremely appropriate, and I think actually really wise. And what I was thinking about when you're talking, Riley, is so the previous president of the United States, the president of the United States is the most powerful person in the world. And you talk about who Donald Trump is and is not beholden to. Joe Biden was the previous president, the most powerful man in the world. And I'll never be able to get over the fact that the most powerful man in the world was forced to step away from his own re-election campaign because he was ultimately beholden to other influences, whether it was Hollywood or the global elites. They said, look, you are no longer a useful tool that will allow us to maintain our hold on the global economy. And so they forced him to step aside, which is why we now have Kamala Harris selling a book about, for somehow, the shortest presidential campaign in history. Like, that's something to brag about. But the point of that is to say the forces on the left are beholden to others, and that's why the global status quo has been what it is. Donald Trump is not, and you're seeing this be upended one trade deal at a time. You know, the deals that were announced yesterday are because today is the day with the tariffs. Riley, forget about what about happened in Japan? Like, we can now send cars to Japan for the first time in generations. I'm old enough to remember when the Japan auto was seen as this existential threat to the U.S. industry and the U.S. economy, and he's now completely upended it. That's the correct use of power on behalf of the American people. That's what people voted for, and I think these trade deals are just, we're going to see more of these coming. The White House is bragging about $150 billion in revenue so far from these tariffs, and so any countries that don't announce new trade deals, like Japan and the EU have done, just means the money will continue to pour into the U.S. Treasury.
You know, something you've just said, it's striking, and here's why. Because it's not just about the position, right? Having the power at your disposal, but having the courage and the fortitude to use it. And I think that speaks to what's going on because, yes, we saw tariffs during President Trump's first administration, but this is a lot bigger and bolder than what we saw back then. And I think it speaks to this wake-up call that President Trump has had because they tried to throw him in prison. They tried to bankrupt him. They shot the guy in the face, okay? They literally went after his life. So you got to be thinking, you're a second-term president, you're a lame duck from day one. What else do you have to lose? Throw the whole kitchen sink at it and do everything you physically can to make record-breaking deals for the American people. So that's just, I imagine that's what's going on right now in the White House, this sense of grave urgency, because it's like, we're at a pivotal moment in American history right now. We're losing the economic engine that gave us so much prosperity in the last century. Under Biden, like you said, rightfully so, you had people skipping meals just to keep the lights on, okay? People coming out of retirement, taxes and inflation and runaway spending burning through their savings, making it physically impossible to generate any kind of wealth or opportunity for your kids and your grandkids. It's disgusting. And so I think that what we're seeing right now is it's bigger than tariffs. It's a complete revival of the American economic engine that made this country remarkable and great. So speaking of that then, let's talk about the tariffs right now, what we're seeing, and how they're specifically going to impact the American people. What are you expecting to see in terms of the aftermath moving forward, Eric?
Well, I expect we'll see more deals come, right? Because that has just absolutely been the playbook. I mean, today is the deadline, and they say it's not going to go into effect until August the 7th because the Customs and Border folks need that much time, allegedly, to be able to get everything straight. But if you don't think that there's more negotiations that will be happening behind closed doors in the next 6-7 days, then I don't think you've been paying attention to the way that Donald Trump and his team operate. It's all about leverage, and it's all about ultimately collecting leverage on behalf of the American people. Yes. And one point to make, Riley, you talked about how people are living paycheck to paycheck. Never forget, in one of his first interviews, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talked about how more Americans than ever took European vacations last year, but more Americans than ever also used food pantries, because we have a really hollowed out and very real middle class and lower tier problem. Those are the people Donald Trump is standing up for. Those are the people, to your point, Donald Trump is using his power on behalf of. And so, yeah, he's going to hold countries like Brazil, Laos, Myanmar that we have these huge trade deficits with. He's like, no, we're going to collect revenue from you until we can get these companies who are so in love with the status quo that that's one of the reasons why they weren't a huge fan of the Trump administration, because they're able to use cheap labor. It's good for their bottom line, but it's not good for the American economy. Donald Trump knows that. And so, look, these other countries are going to come to the table, as South Korea just did, I think, earlier today, and say, fine, we recognize we have gotten the better end of this for the last little while, and it's now time to play evenly. So just like in Japan, we now can send American energy and American automobiles to Korea with no tariff, and we're still going to tariff some of their goods. And so I think you'll find that Donald Trump's not messing around. He's going to hold the feet to the fire, and they're going to strike deals on behalf of the American people. The sooner countries get that, the sooner you'll see these high tariffs come down. Mexico has secured a 90-day extension. Canada has chosen not to play ball, and that's why they're seeing a 35% tariff on some of their goods. It's a new sheriff in town, and people are learning what the new law is very quickly.
That's interesting. But just to follow up then, let's talk about China for a moment, because I'm not sure what's going to happen with the negotiations there, but I do wonder what you're thinking might happen moving forward with China.
Yeah, I think that you'll find they will continue to negotiate. I think they're paying very close attention. You mentioned Taiwan. I think they're seeing what's happening in Japan and what's happening in Korea. I think there's an effort on some level to isolate China by kind of cultivating these deals with the EU and other countries around the globe. So I think that they'll continue to negotiate, but it's been equal parts carrot and stick. I think I mentioned on your show last time, NVIDIA, this U.S. software giant, is able to sell their chips back in China again. That's obviously something that's good for the American economy. So I think they'll strike deals in China, but they're going to be, China wants access to the U.S. market. The U.S. wants access to the Chinese market. And so I think that's ultimately going to be what they kind of negotiate over.
Okay, now let's talk timeline for a moment, because I love the ideas here. I love the energy and the focus. But I also understand practically, you can't just reshore all of these industries that have been lost over years and years, right? So what do you think it's going to take for us to sort of, I guess really I should back up and say, what are you expecting for timeline? Do you think it'll take weeks to bring jobs back? Months? Is it already happening? What are you seeing, Eric?
Weeks. Riley, you sound like me when I drop off my car and I'm like checking in an hour later. I'm like, hey, you guys got it fixed yet? Like, we just got it. It's going to take a minute. But I know we can be impatient. It's funny, just earlier this week, there was news about how great the economy was doing despite negative predictions over the impact that tariffs would have. And then today they announced these job numbers, and people are like, oh no, clearly the economy's not working. And like, well, actually the job numbers are a little down because you've got seasonal employment numbers for teaching. You've got some of the foreign-born people that are leaving the country, and there's some other numbers that are kind of impacting that. So it's funny that any negative number will be seized upon as evidence that somehow this is not working. But Riley, to your point, this is a fundamental resetting and reshaping of the American economy. Yes. So I do think it's going to take some time. The fact that they're getting these deals in place is the first step. Now you actually have to have these companies in these countries who have made pledges to invest in the U.S. economy. It takes a while to build factories, right? It takes a while to do these things. We had a Congressman, Wesley Hunt, on our program, the podcast that I host called The Drilldown, not too long ago, and he was talking about some of these guys. Look, you got to let the cake bake for a little while. And I think at the end of the day, it's early still. I mean, it's only July, or I guess it's August, in the first year of President Trump's presidency. But I think you'll see real changes start to impact the economy ahead of the midterm elections, because they get that that's really the next benchmark when things need to have some points on the board.
Agreed. It's a game of delayed gratification, right? A little bit of short-term pain and discomfort for so much gain and opportunity long-term. Let's think about, playing the long game like China does all the time. They don't think in terms of 4-year administration, they think in terms of centuries. So we have to ask ourselves, where do we want to be in 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 100 years from now? And I think we can all agree we want this robust economic engine that can sustain a thriving middle class again. So I'll end by saying that I think that's the goal. I think we're going to get there. This is certainly a gamble to some extent, but I see it working already, and I think it's going to pay off in big spades moving forward. So that's what I'm hoping for and praying for. But Eric, in the meantime, I just want to say thank you for stopping by because I really appreciate your insight.